Let's deal with the theory first because it is not a bad one. It just does not hold up once you check it against the footage. The claim going around Silo forums is that Daniel Keene already built the Silo network once and had the memory of it taken from him. The logic behind it is actually pretty sound on paper. Daniel is, almost suspiciously, exactly the engineer this project needs. So the question people are asking is fair. If Thurman already knows what he can do, why spend 6 episodes auditioning him with surveillance and pressure campaigns instead of just making the offer on day one? The theory answers that by saying this is not day one. This is a second recruitment. He already did the job, and something erased it. The centerpiece of that theory is the apartment from episode 4. Helen takes Daniel to a place she calls her ex's apartment, and some viewers have floated the idea that Daniel is that ex, standing inside his own home without recognizing a single piece of it. It is a clever read. It is also not what is on screen, and we will walk through exactly why in a few minutes. But the instinct behind the theory is correct. This season really has been building a case about stolen memory. Juliet is being drugged to forget. Charlotte comes back from a mission with a gap, where her memories should be. Camille just dosed an entire Silo's water supply with something designed to erase people's understanding of what is happening around them. So when a viewer looks at Daniel and asks, wait, did they do this to him too? That is not a wild leap. It is the show training you to ask exactly that question. It just happens to be asking it about the wrong character. Rewind to Thurman's very first conversation with Daniel, back at the top of the season. She spends most of it complimenting his record, and she is specific about which parts of his career she brings up. His time with the Army Corps of Engineers, a flood control project he ran in New Orleans, and one invention in particular, a drill capable of boring deep underground without disturbing the surface above it. Then she adds a detail almost as a throwaway line. Replacing the levees with tunnels was his idea. Now hold that thought next to what building 51 underground cities would actually require. Each structure runs well over 100 levels straight down, and all of them need to go into the ground without the rest of the world noticing a thing. That is not primarily a secrecy problem. It is a physics problem. Think about what it normally takes to excavate something that deep. You are talking about mountains of displaced earth, convoys of trucks running for years, road closures, permit filings, and a small army of local news crews showing up to ask what exactly is being built in this field. You cannot hide a hole that size unless the machine digging it leaves the surface looking untouched when it is done. That is Daniel's machine. He solved that exact problem years before Thurman ever came looking for him. And he solved it in New Orleans in public, funded by the government, filed neatly through the Army Corps of Engineers, which happens to be precisely the kind of paper trail a classified federal project would go digging through. By the time Thurman shakes his hand in episode 1, she has already read every line of that file. And the show does not just tell us this technology exists somewhere off-screen. It showed us the wreckage of it 3 years earlier. In Season 1, deep beneath Silo 18, George Wilkins takes Juliet down to a chamber that houses an enormous, long-dead digging machine. It has clearly been down there since the silo itself was built, and every usable part of it has been stripped away over 3 centuries. Something designed that machine. Something bored a structure over 100 levels into solid rock. The show even names the chamber after it, the Digger Void. That room becomes one of the most reused locations of the entire series. George hides in it while chasing down old blueprints. Martha Walker seals it off after the rebellion. Robert Sims stashes Bernard down there for months, while the rest of the silo believes he was cremated. Nearly every secret currently buried in Silo 18 is, quite literally, buried inside a hole that Daniel's invention carved out. Season 1 gave us the machine. Season 3 is giving us the man who built it. And it planted that connection 3 full years before we ever met Daniel Keene. Now back to that episode 4 apartment, because there is a detail here that got buried under all the theorizing about whether Daniel secretly lives there. Daniel and Helen are hiding out in a place Helen says belongs to her ex, a man named Palmer, currently on assignment overseas. Daniel takes his shoes off, glances around, notices a large photo of Helen still hanging on the wall, and jokes that whenever a relationship of his ends, the first thing he does is bury all the evidence deep in the ground. Helen laughs, the scene moves on, and most viewers moved on with it. But listen to what he actually says. This is a man who built a drill specifically designed to bury things underground without leaving a trace on the surface. His instinct, the thing he reaches for without even thinking, is that when something needs to disappear, you put it deep in the earth where nobody will ever find it. 2 episodes later, a senator asks him to do exactly that to the entire human race. This is also the scene the memory wipe theory leans on hardest, and it is where that theory runs into trouble. For things in this exact scene rule out the idea that Daniel is secretly Palmer. First, the show names Palmer directly, as a specific person, not a vague blank the writers left open. Second, we are told precisely where he is, on assignment in South Sudan, which is an oddly specific detail to invent for a person the show wants us to believe does not exist. Third, that photo of Helen is still hanging on the wall, establishing a relationship the show is asking us to read as real and completely separate from Daniel. And fourth, Daniel asks Helen whether Palmer would mind her coming and going. That is not a question anyone asks about their own apartment. Add to that the way Helen behaves around Daniel for the entire season, treating him like someone she is still getting to know, with none of the confusion you would expect from a woman standing in a flat with a man who has forgotten she exists. The reading falls apart under its own weight. Silo hides things from its characters constantly. It has not, in the past timeline, ever hidden the truth from its audience like that. There is one more detail in that apartment worth flagging because it has nothing to do with the memory theory and everyone still walked past it. There is a painting on the wall, a shrouded figure leading a line of children somewhere unknown. Nobody in the scene mentions it. Given where this season is headed, a covered figure leading a chosen group underground while nobody explains why, that image stops looking like set dressing. Here is where this video gets to say something the earlier coverage of Episode 6 could not, because Episode 7, titled Radio, aired since then, and it changes the shape of this whole theory. Daniel and Helen get flown, along with Charlotte, to meet a tech billionaire named Per Stenson, the man funding Charlotte's clinic and, as it turns out, one of the architects behind this entire project. Everyone is pressured into signing a non-disclosure agreement before they are told anything. And then the plane sets down over Stenson's land in Atlanta, and the show finally lets the camera pull back far enough to show what has actually been happening this whole time. Massive drilling rigs. Workers. Active excavation. Not one hole in the ground. 51 of them, already underway, months or years before the disaster that will eventually force people to use them. This was not a project assembled in a panic after the world ended. It was planned, financed, and already under construction while Daniel was still investigating his sister's case back in Washington. That single detail reframes everything we walked through earlier. This is not a hypothetical about what Daniel's drill could theoretically be used for one day. The show has now shown us the actual field, the actual machines, at the actual scale the story has been building towards since Season 1. Daniel is not being recruited to design something from scratch either. He is being folded into a project that has already broken ground. So why does Daniel agree to any of this? By the time Thurman makes her offer, he has nothing left to lose. His sister's squadron has been wiped out, and the investigation into it quietly shut down. His source has vanished. His contact at the Pentagon has backed out. His phones are gone. His van has been remotely driven somewhere he never chose to go. Every lead he had has been bought off or scared into silence. And all of that pressure traces back to the same people now standing in front of him with an offer. Then there is the piece he genuinely cannot walk away from. Charlotte's treatment runs through a clinic funded by Per Stenson, the same man who was just introduced as one of the architects of this whole operation. Whoever controls the project also controls his sister's care. Saying yes is not only about saving the world in some abstract sense. It is about keeping the one family member he has left inside a facility that could cut her off tomorrow. Helen is in that hangar too, and that is not a coincidence either. A journalist who has already done real digging into a cover-up is either the most dangerous person in the room or the most useful one, depending entirely on which side gets to her first. The show already told us Helen once took the fall for bending the truth to protect a source. Anyone recruiting her knows exactly what that means. She is someone who will shade the facts when she believes the cause is worth it, which happens to be an extremely convenient trait in whoever eventually writes the official version of how the silos came to exist. And here is the part that turns this from a fun catch into the actual backbone of the season. Daniel is very likely going to build this thing without ever being told what it is truly for. Nobody needs to erase his memory, because nobody appears to be planning on giving him the full picture in the first place. He designs the drilling. Someone else handles the life support. Someone else installs the safeguard system we already know exists 300 years later. Someone else decides who eventually gets to walk through the door. That is how you construct 51 underground cities with an enormous workforce and never spring a leak. Nobody gets the whole blueprint. And it is exactly how the silos still function centuries later. Bernard knew more than Sims did. The head of IT knows more than the mayor. Even Bernard, sitting on full vault access, had no idea the safeguard protocol existed until Lucas told him. Compartmentalized knowledge is not a rule that started when the doors sealed shut. It started with the people who dug the doors in the first place. Look at how much of this season is built around controlling what people are allowed to know. Juliet is drugged every morning specifically, so she cannot hold on to what she is learning. Charlotte comes home from her final mission with a deliberate gap where her memory of it should be. Camille has just put a memory-suppressing compound into an entire silo's water supply. A season spending this much energy on stolen knowledge, while simultaneously introducing the engineer who builds the silos, is not telling two separate stories. It is telling one story twice, 300 years apart. Juliet is fighting to recover something that was taken from her. Daniel does not even know yet that there is something being kept from him. And there is a genuine sting hidden in the timing of all this. Daniel spends this entire season trying to find out what happened to his sister. He loses his sources, his phone, his freedom, and eventually the investigation itself. Every one of those things was taken from him by the same people now offering him a job. That job is building the very structure that will keep humanity alive after a catastrophe he was never allowed to fully understand. He may spend the rest of his life on the largest engineering project in human history and never learn exactly what it was protecting anyone from, which, 3 centuries later, turns out to be the exact same deal every single resident of Silo 18 inherits, passed all the way down from the man who took it first. So where does this go from here? A few specific beats would lock this reading in completely if the remaining episodes deliver them. Watch for New Orleans getting name-dropped again, because that flood control project was very likely never really about flood control. Watch for a rule attached to Daniel's contract about what he is and is not permitted to ask, because a boundary like that on screen would confirm the compartmentalization angle outright. And watch to see whether Daniel ever recognizes something he has no business recognizing, because if that happens, the memory theory gets a second life after all. For now, though, the pieces fit without needing a memory wipe to explain them. The drill exists. The tunnels exist. Episode 7 just showed us the field where 51 of them are being carved into the ground in real time. And there is a stripped-out digging machine sitting at the bottom of Silo 18 that someone eventually had to design. Daniel Keene just might be the last person standing in that hangar who has not yet figured out exactly what he is about to spend the rest of his life building. Doubt if you caught something in these episodes we didn't cover here, drop it in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want the breakdown on Episode 7's biggest reveal the moment Episode 8 drops, that's exactly what this channel is for, so consider sticking around for it.